And cheers! Here we go. Welcome to the show. It's happy hour again. Welcome to PT Pinecast, a podcast that saves physical therapists from missing out on amazing insight, remarkable ideas, and motivational stories here in the world of physical therapy. What's up, guys? I'm Jimmy McKay, your host, broadcasting live from the Arias Medical Studios, also known as my bedroom. Find them online at aureusmedical.com. That is aureusmedical.com. If you're thinking about maybe traveling about the country, maybe you're an essential therapist and you want to go to an area where they really need physical therapists, Arias has positions. Check them at aureusmedical.com. Physical therapists and physical therapist assistants. Pick where you want to go and what you want to do. All settings, all locations well. Great show for you tonight. Rachael Bailey is here from England. It's a totally different time there. All right, I promise I won't make any time zone jokes when Rachael comes on, but she's got a really, really cool story and tripped across it. This is one of the good things about social media when you can trip across someone's story like this. And I want her to dig into it. It's an amazing story. I'm sure she learned a lot, and I want you to learn from that as well. Don't forget, subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. Available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, the whole nine. And now doing this video casting thing, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter at PT Pinecast on the socials there. And don't forget, you can interact with the show as we do this live, no matter where you're watching. So drop your comments, your questions in below. Let us know where you're listening from. Or if you want to drop us a text message. Let's see if we can get that graphic on the screen. That's my phone number on the screen. Some people are like, it's a Google number. It's not his actual number. I defy you to actually text me during the show. That's my actual number. So let me know who you think we should have on the program coming up in just a couple of shows, or what questions you want to know. Let's get the intense music. Yeah, there we go. Let's change it up. Our guest today has a first class degree in physiotherapy from the University of Nottingham. I thought that was just from Robin Hood. I didn't realize it was a real place. It's a real place, people. Also a band 5 physiotherapist. I don't even know what that means. We're going to find out. She's also a survivor of Guillain Barre Syndrome, lived trach and an ICU experience. We're going to learn about that. Let's bring her in right now to the studios. Rachael Bailey. Rachael, welcome to the show.
Hello.
It's a good intro, right?
Hi.
How you doing, Rachael?
Excellent introduction. I'm good, thank you. I'm really good.
Good. So let's do this first. Let's set the stage. You recently graduated. I'm talking like really recently graduated from physiotherapy school, which sounds way cooler than physical therapy school. I'll be honest with you. It sounds fancier. But that was like a month ago. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, I would have graduated last Friday.
Oh wow. Well, I'm sorry that it's happening, but it's
one of those things, isn't it?
It's one of those things that's happening to all of us right now. So everybody's kind of like, I do feel bad for people who are graduating. We've got some of the staff on the show who just graduated, Juliet, not long ago, and it's kind of a bummer. Did you do the thing where everybody did like the virtual graduation slideshow thing?
We've got that booked for tomorrow.
Nice. Is that why you were getting all ready? You were getting all done up before the show started?
Yeah, it's just bleaching my hair.
She came on. She's like, is this a TV? This is a camera thing. I'm like, oh shoot. I guess did we not tell you that? Was that not clear? But we appreciate you making time. You're already starting to work. You got graduation tomorrow, but you're already starting to work. What setting do you work in now as a physio over in the UK?
So I work in a specialist heart and lung centre in it's part of a trust within London, so it's very, very cool, and I've been there for 2 weeks.
Perfect. That's great. So mentioned in your introduction, we kind of tripped across your story on social media, and a lot of people do a little social media bashing. There are some dangerous things out there, just annoying things. But yours, as soon as we saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, we need to get in contact with this woman. She led an amazing story. I mentioned it in your intro. You survived Guillain Barre, but before all that started, I think the headline actually read, she thought it was a hangover, but it turned out to be Guillain Barre Syndrome. So where does the story start for you when people, kind of get wind of your journey? Where does it start for you?
Well, I was studying psychology in Liverpool, and before I had this terrible hangover, which turned out to be me, the start of Guillain Barre, I'd caught what I thought was freshers flu, and so I'd been really. Have you heard of
No,
freshers flu? Is that a thing over there?
no.
So
Maybe just
it's
different name.
it's the illness that all of like the new students get when you go to university. Like in your first 6 to 8 weeks, you get that horrible flu because you've been going out too much. Yeah. So I had freshers flu. And it actually turned out that it was viral meningitis, but we didn't know it at the time. And then that's what triggered me having Guillain Barre. But yeah, I'd basically, by a miracle, I'd come home to Nottingham for my reading week, and I'd come home on the Friday. On the Saturday, I'd gone out to go and see some of my friends. And then on the Sunday, I woke up thinking, oh my God, I feel horrific. And then the Monday morning, I couldn't walk.
Wow. All right. So hold on. But the progression there, you just couldn't walk. You couldn't get out of bed.
I fell out of bed and army crawled to the toilet, got onto the toilet and then fell off the toilet, and then thought, oh, this isn't right. And that's when I was like, yeah, something's gone wrong here.
Yeah, this is not a hangover. This is not, running yourself ragged in the first couple of weeks of school. And how old are you at this? Where's the timetable?
So I was 19 at the time. I'm 25 now.
Wow. All right. So when you can't, leave the toilet, that's a serious issue. It's not a hangover anymore. Do you immediately go to the hospital? Do they immediately know what you're dealing with?
Well, I rang. I didn't actually ring like the emergency services straight away. I rang like an intermediate service because I didn't have any idea what was going on, and I just assumed that I maybe worst came to worst, I trapped a nerve or something. I'd been wearing this new pair of really chunky boots on my night out and just thought I must have like tweaked something. Obviously now I've done my physio degree, I'm slightly more aware that these things don't just happen, and it doesn't cause your legs to stop working.
Yeah, but you were doing the thing we all do. Even after PT school, I'd still talk myself out of it's probably not that. It's probably not that.
Yeah.
But you were looking, you were hearing hoofbeats and you were thinking, horses. You were trying to look for the most common cause of this. So is an intermediary, is that kind of like an urgent care, like not quite the hospital? It's kind of like a...
Yeah, like you can ring them up and then they'll give you feedback, and they sent me an ambulance. So they obviously thought it was a bit more serious than I did.
Red flag.
So I went straight to the hospital, and I was actually diagnosed within about 3 hours. So they gave me my diagnosis and I was taken straight to the women's neurological ward. And I remember Googling what Guillain Barre was.
Wow.
And thinking to myself, oh, it's not that bad. I'm 19, I'm going to be fine.
Right.
And I text my mum the link, like the Wikipedia link.
Right.
And she was like, oh my God, this is awful. And I was like, Mum, chill out. It's going to be fine.
Well, you know what Mom did immediately? She looked at Wikipedia and then she copy and pasted Guillain Barre and she found WebMD, and that's the worst possible website you want to go to for anything. So that's what Mom did because she cares. So you're in the hospital. So right now, at this moment, is it just your legs? Is that what you're experiencing? Because it goes peripheral, proximal, distal to proximal. So it was progressing at this point. You're diagnosed pretty quick.
Yeah. So at that point, it was just my legs. And then I was on the neuro ward for a couple of days, and I sort of was measuring my own progression by how high up I could hold my phone to my face. So as each day went on, I was not able to hold my phone up. Obviously, at that time, being 19, I was all about my friends, staying in touch with everyone, and to be fair, I still am. But that was like really important to me being a...
Yeah, there's not a lot going on when you're laying in a hospital bed. So
no.
Of course.
Yeah, no, not at all. And then I was admitted on the Monday, and then they were doing the the respiratory tests, seeing about my lung function to see if my diaphragm was involved. And on the Thursday, I'd started to lose my swallow and my respiratory function was starting to decline. So at that point, I was taken to the ICU.
Wow.
And then
that's 3 days later. That's pretty quick.
Yeah. So yeah, quite fast. And what's really ridiculous is that I was still convinced that I was absolutely fine. And it was Halloween on the Friday. And I remember on like the Tuesday or the Wednesday booking my tickets back to Liverpool so I could get back to go to a Halloween party for the Friday,
Wow.
convinced that I was absolutely fine.
Yeah, because when we're that young, we're just kind of like, it'll probably get better. We've all been sick, especially, and we feel invincible. Sometimes some of us feel invincible well past our teen years. But wow, even laying there and you're realizing you can't hold that phone up and they're measuring respiratory function. You're like, I'm trying to decide between this costume and that costume. And that's the biggest thing on my mind right now.
That was literally me at the time.
Wow.
I didn't have any idea.
Yeah, but even after they diagnosed you and you looked it up, you literally were just minimizing, like, I'll get through this. I'll be fine.
Yeah, one of the nurses came up to me and said, the last man who had this, he was here for 4 months. And I was like, well, how old was he? And they were like, 60 or something like that. And I was like, well, there you go. I'm 19. I'm going to be fine. Like,
oh man. All right. So when I tripped across your story online, there were some photos and we're going to throw some of those on the screen. And so when your respiratory function, it sounds way better when you say respiratory. Everything you guys do sounds smarter. I mean, this was you. Like, walk us through this. Like, how far in is this?
So that was a little bit of a way through because I didn't have my trachea put in until maybe 2 weeks into my admission. And if you can see, my eyes are open. So when I was at my very worst, I couldn't actually blink. So at that point, that was probably maybe 4 weeks in.
Yeah, we've got
5 weeks in, maybe.
We've got a different photo from that. I mean, this looks like it's even further, right? I mean, you barely open your eyes there, if at all.
So yeah, that was after I'd had. So once I'd been taken to the ICU, I had a really rare reaction to the venous immunoglobulins that they'd given me as the treatment, Prez, which had caused my brain to swell. And I ended up having a grand mal seizure. So they put me under sedation and I thought I'd been asleep for a few hours and it turns out I'd been sedated for a few days. And when I woke up, I'd been intubated. And so this was me straight after waking up. And for some reason, the first thing that I communicated to my mum to do was to take a picture. So that was per my request.
Wow. Wow. That is amazing. What are you experiencing at this when you wake up? I mean, I feel like we can study it, but you lived it. What are you experiencing when you're waking up after being intubated?
So I have a phobia of vomit, and at that point, it's when I talk to people about it, like, my priorities were so wrong. I was so concerned about vomiting. I wasn't even concerned at the fact that I had a machine breathing for me. I was concerned that there was something down my throat,
right? And
I didn't like the sensation. So that for me was like a big thing. Still very much unaware of how serious how seriously ill I was and how critically unwell I was. But I didn't know I'd had my seizure. And so it was when the doctors were doing the ward round and there was one of the doctors at the end of my bed, and he mentioned, the seizure. And I just remember looking at my mum, and that was the moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm actually not well. And that was probably a day or two after I'd been brought out of sedation.
So yeah, so you're there. Difficulty, you can't get out of bed. Difficulty moving. You're still planning your Halloween plans. You've been intubated. You've been unconscious for a few days. Only then, 2 days later, do you realize this is a little more serious. Well, good for you for having a positive attitude. I can't knock that. I mean, it would be difficult, I think, for anybody to wrap their mind around that happening to them, especially so young, because we're used to getting, sick and getting back, healing pretty quickly. I used to coach kids swimming that have a broken arm. A few weeks later, they're back in the pool, they're swimming, nothing's wrong. So we kind of grow up thinking that we're a little bit invincible.
Yeah.
So after this,
I definitely thought that I was invincible.
Yeah, I could see that. So how do you progress from there? Now you're intubated. You're starting to realize that you had a seizure, and you're starting to realize how serious this is. What happens next?
I became very depressed and anxious and very resentful of my situation and very, very frustrated. I hated everyone, and I hated the reality I was living in. And I was in a lot of pain, and pain was probably the biggest thing that affected my mentality at that point. And especially because I was on so many drugs to try and help. And so I was actually a very, very horrible patient and a very horrible person to be around. Bearing in mind at that time, I couldn't actually speak, and I was communicating through a letterboard. I was vicious and nasty to everyone around me.
They understood, though, right? I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, they did. And like my doctors, nurses, physios, everyone who looked after me was amazing. And my family were absolutely incredible. And they all understood that I'd gone from living the most independent life that I'd ever had, moving away from home, doing everything for myself, to suddenly being almost like a newborn baby where people were having to clean me and make me cough for myself. And it was just, and it, because it was so fast. And even though I was in denial for the first like 2 or so weeks, when it did hit me, I was just not a happy bunny. I was not impressed by the situation at all.
Say it in such a British way. Not impressed. We would say absolutely freaking pissed. You say not impressed. I like that. That's where our scales are a little off. I don't think a word impressed would be coming on there. So you're in effect, you're locked in your own body. And I think being a little bit pissed is you're probably due to do that and just be pissed at whatever situation you're in. How do you progress out of that? You're sitting here talking with us today. You just graduated from physio school. How did the progression come after this moment, this low moment?
Well, God, this low moment lasted until about mid-January, and I was admitted in the October. So this was a very long low moment, but it got to the point where I was transferred in the rehab unit, and I'd sort of thought once I was out of the ICU, then that would be it. It'd be plain sailing. And I had no idea quite how deconditioned I was. I'd lost a lot of weight and I was so weak. And then I realized that, oh my God, I'm in like the second leg of this nightmare. And I basically refused to participate in all occupational therapy, all physiotherapy. I was barely eating. And it came to a point where I'd refused physio and basically thrown a tantrum, screaming, crying, and they'd taken me back to the room. And then my physio had come in and been like, Rachel, if you want to leave the hospital, you need to start working with us. And for some reason, her sitting down and saying that to me was like the light bulb moment. And I was like, she's completely right. Why am I behaving this way? And then from there, I progressed really, really quickly and I think I stood for the first time pretty much independently, maybe a week and a half later.
Wow. What do you think it was about how she said it, how many times she said it, the way she said it, that clicked with you? Because I think we can all relate to having someone in our professional physio lives or our personal lives where you know that someone needs to do something, and it's I mean, you've got a background in psychology too, so you're pretty well versed to answer this. What do you think was it about that was that light bulb moment?
I think it was her sitting. I think it was the fact that they'd been so patient with me. Everyone who'd looked after me had been so patient in this time and I was refusing and throwing tantrums every single time I was doing therapy. And then this one time where they were like, fine, don't do it. And then she came and sat with me afterwards and she just drilled it into me, really, really drilled it into me. Like, if you want to leave and if you want to get better, then you have to do this. And I think in my head, I must have had some sort of fear that they might give up on me or that I was giving up on myself, and thought, I've pushed them to the point where they don't actually want to work with me anymore. And then I was like, shit, I need to get my head into gear and do this.
That's a lot of psychology.
I remember actually. Yeah, I remember she said something about, because I was in so much pain and the pain was the massive limiting factor. And she was like, you need to spin it on its head and be like, this is good pain, at least you can feel it, kind of thing. And from that point, even though I'd cry most sessions, I was coaching myself like, this is good, this is good, this is good.
Wow, it sounds like, I mean, really just framing and saying, verbalizing the things that you're afraid of and the things that you're experiencing instead of ignoring them was part of that reason that she was able to connect with you. And then you sort of owning that pain and saying, this is good pain, even though I'm sure in that moment you were like, I don't want to be experiencing this anymore. But you realized that the only way through the hell was to keep going through hell.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and that's what I get asked quite a lot, like, how did you do it? And it's just like, you have to do it. Like, you just have to, you can't escape. If you're living something like that, you can't escape it. There's nothing that can be done. And you're surrounded by people who want to help you and want to keep you alive and want to keep you, get you back to how you were. You just have to get through it.
Wow. All right. So how was the ending? What was leaving the hospital like? Because you're not there anymore. So you leave the hospital. What was your condition like? Let's talk in physio terms when you were actually able to leave.
So I was relatively independent. I walked out of the hospital with crutches. I had a shortened Achilles tendon, so I had quite a bad limp from a contracture that had developed whilst I was I'd had foot drop. So I had a bit of a limp going on, and I was painfully thin. My muscles were so atrophied. So I'd walked out, but I'd left with a wheelchair and I'd left with crutches. And I knew from there it was very much, I was going to have outpatient physiotherapy and I was going to have physio at home, but it was very much dependent on me getting back to normal and hoping that would be enough to recondition myself so that I could get back to how I used to be.
Right. You didn't want to miss any more Halloween parties, so you had to make sure you were getting back to all the things that you definitely wanted to do. Now you were
well,
go ahead.
I was going to say the whole time that my goal had been to be discharged by my friend's mum's wedding, and I managed to do it 2 days before the wedding.
There you go. Well done. So you got to have your eye on the prize there for that. I like that. So at this point, you're a psychology student, you mentioned, and how close were you to finishing your psychology degree? Because you weren't going to school for physical therapy, physio.
No, I was 6 weeks into my degree when this happened. I barely started.
That's great. So really, your experience had prompted the switch or prompted the change in what you wanted to study and what did you wanted to do?
Yeah, my physios were the most incredible people in everyone that looked after me was incredible, but my physios were just, I hated having respiratory physio, and they were so patient and so kind and they educated me on all of it. So I've always been interested in the human body, and a massive thing for me was control. And so they would coach me through everything they were doing, and that was what gave me sort of like the initial taste of physios did, because at that point I thought physios just looked after people who played football or like sprained their ankle. I had no idea that you'd find them within the acute setting. And then I went to the rehab unit, and that was more intensive, and I was having physiotherapy every single day. And it wasn't actually seeing my own progress, it was seeing the progress of the other people within the rehab unit. And because when you're living it, you don't really take note of, oh, I can move my finger a little bit more today.
Sure.
But when you're seeing someone who's had like a traumatic brain injury learning how to walk again, and then they walk past your room, it's literally like, that's incredible. And so I was just inspired.
That's fantastic. So you switch your degree immediately, or did you wait a while, or how did it go? Did you have a conversation with the parents? I'm changing my life. This traumatic experience has now changed my life.
Well, with my one of my respiratory physios, she works at the University of Nottingham, and she'd approached me and said, I want to use you as a case study for the course. And so I was like, at that point, it kind of got into my head like, oh, physio students, this seems kind of cool. And she took loads of videos whilst I was doing my rehab. But then I stayed in touch with her. And I actually went back to university in Liverpool the following September to continue with my psychology degree. And then I got ill again. And in my head, I was like, there is a bad omen, like, over Liverpool. Someone does not want me to be there.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, I reached out to my old physio and said, I want to do what you do.
Wow.
How do I do it? And it went from there.
That's fantastic. What would you want people to know, or what do you think that, because our audience is mainly physiotherapists from around the world, what are some things that physical therapists should pay attention to when working with any patient, really? But you were in a very, very hyper vulnerable state in that bed as somebody who 19 years old, shouldn't have been there or wasn't really grasping that situation. What are the things that you wish that other physios should know? What are the lessons?
I think for me, and something that I try and do with all of my patients, is I like to give my patients as much control over their therapy as much as possible, and to also remember that someone who's coming to you in pain or unwell, a hospital or that kind of any environment where they're being cared for, like, they don't want to be in that situation, and so don't make it more hellish than you need to. And I know obviously we don't ever intend to go and ruin someone's day by making them get out of bed, but I just think it's so important to have that patient-centered care and to let them have as much control over it. Like, I had a patient the other day who told me that she really didn't fancy physio, and I was like, well, I'm not here to force you to do anything, but I am here to educate you and try and motivate you so that you want to engage with me. And we ended up having a really nice chat, and at the end of it she came and did an independent walk, which she'd not yet done yet. So I just feel like being able to have that, rather than going into a situation being like, I'm going to do this and this with the patient, but letting them almost tailor whatever you're doing. I just feel like it builds such a better therapeutic alliance, and you get such better outcomes and better relationships.
Yeah, I mean, you first need to have a connection before someone's going to want to work for you, because the thing that I keyed on when you were talking about your fear, or just before that light bulb moment, which was, you said you were afraid that they were about to give up on you. It showed that, you were having an emotional moment or moments, and they recognized that, but it really was that connection that you had obviously made, because you were afraid they were going to give up on you. Like, they were going to disappoint them, even in the middle of this thing that was happening to you, not them. And that was the thing that made the difference for you and made you step up your game. So that's fantastic that you're still able to now switch that, know that, and give that. I love it.
Yeah, definitely.
Your story got picked up for a couple news outlets. I think we have some pictures of some major outlets over in the UK. There's look at that. Wow, like the Daily Mail. Is that you? We'll go back one. Is that you on the left there? Doing this, it's a nice candid shot there of you.
Yes.
Like, I love that look on your face, just doing some sit-to-stands. And now, when were these articles shared? Was this when you were already out of the hospital, or?
So yeah, I'm trying to actually remember what happened. So the initial articles came out. I think that the hospital media got in touch with me because my recovery had been so good, and once I'd engaged, I'd recovered so incredibly well, and then got on with my life. And the hospital media got in touch and were like, we're really proud of how well you've done, and we want to write a story about you. And then it sort of just went from there. And then I obviously decided to be a physio, and I tweeted from my professional account just saying, like, I'm really proud of myself. And that then went mad, which I'd not expected. And then the second lot of articles came out.
Yeah, let's take a look at that other article picture we just had a second ago. This one had a good sit to stand, and this is like kind of like more your full story. If you can take a look at that bottom right hand picture, it does not look like Rachael is happy in that bottom right hand picture at all. But that's fantastic, because listen, what you're able to do here is you're able to share your journey. If someone else is going through something even remotely similar, to see someone like yourself who's done it, they get to maybe kind of look at your progress and your determination and your growth and say, this is possible. I can do that. And then where's that last picture that we had up? I want to see the cap and gown because that was recent, right? Look at that. There's Rachael.
Yeah, I'm wearing all this. I'm wearing all the same
We're
dress
in the same outfit.
all of them.
I'm wearing the same outfit too.
Yeah.
I got a pattern on today. How's it feel to now graduate knowing and you're already working? And what setting are you in? I want to make sure the audience knows this as well. What setting are you treating patients in?
So I'm in a tertiary specialist heart and lung center. So I'm in the acute setting. I'm currently on the cardiothoracic team. So we cover the HDU, ICU, recovery, and cardiothoracic wards.
Were you pulled in that direction going through your studies? Was that something you said, consciously or subconsciously?
I find respiratory physiotherapy incredibly interesting. I think that it's absolutely fascinating, and the acutely unwell patient terrifies me, but intrigues me. I just think it is so incredibly interesting. So for me to be able to do my first job where as I'll get such a good respiratory grounding, that means that I can go into another like acute center later down the line. And I'll be prepared to deal with sort of any patients, be they surgical or like cardiac or anything like that. So I think I wanted to have my first rotation or my first job in this area so that I could get a really good understanding of what I find one of the most interesting, but also one of the hardest areas.
Wow.
Because I know I'll be able to apply it to other areas in my career.
Yeah. And I think you've got a little bit of a different viewpoint in terms of how important that is. You're able to bring that in, even if you never mention the story, you're able to kind of bring that into knowing what it was like to be terribly vulnerable and in a down place. So that's fantastic. Kudos to you. What's in the future that you think? What's coming down the line in 5 or 10 years? Do you have a plan like that?
I don't know. I'm gonna take over physiotherapy, and I'm gonna just do something big. No, I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. I love thanks. No, I love neurological physio. Like neurophysio for me is also something which I find it's the things that I had when I was an inpatient are the things that I'm probably most passionate about now, probably because I have that emotional attachment to them. Sure. But I find them really, really cool. So I feel like I'll always be in those areas.
Fantastic. All right, Rachael, are you ready to play 3 questions? We make everybody go through this. So are you prepared for this?
I think so.
You think so? Only one way to find out. How terrible could it be? Let's do 3 questions right now. 3 questions brought to you by our friends at Arias Medical Staffing. Again, if you're looking for positions to be a great physio, inpatient, outpatient, all these settings, anywhere in the 50 U.S. states, find them online at eusmedical.com. I didn't actually know Nottingham was a real place until I was in like my mid-20s. I just thought it was from Robin Hood. Thought it was fake, but it's real. It's where you went to school. But if you were eventually, once everything is safe, if you would ever come to the U.S., is there ever a place that you'd want to go or some place you've heard of that you're like, I've got to see what that looks like? Anywhere over here?
Do you know what? I have one of my best friends is from San Antonio, and she goes on about San Antonio, Texas all of the time. And so I would go just so that I can understand what she's on about.
Yeah, it's a good town. I spent a couple of evenings there. You got to go visit the Alamo. That's what you want to tell Rachael. Just say, I'm going to see the Alamo. That's in San Antonio. So you got that covered. All right.
Is that like a big statue?
So it's actually tiny. It's a tiny. It was a fort, and it was attacked back in the day. I'm really showing my American history here. But it's tiny. I hung out with it. I assumed it was going to be this big giant building. It is not. You could miss it very easily, but it's very historic. That's the Alamo.
Okay.
All right. Second question. What is something that you watched, read, or listened to? Maybe a book, a movie, a podcast, something that you think the audience could learn from?
Anything with Louis Theroux. Do you know who Louis Theroux is?
No. Who's that?
my gosh, he's incredible. He's this documentary filmmaker from London, and he does BBC documentaries on pretty much everything. And anything. He's got books, he's got podcasts, he's got documentaries, everything. Anything that's by Louis Theroux, I stan. That's
Done.
that's my jam.
Done and done. This is how I find out about stuff. When people say, have you heard of this person? I go, no, educate me. So Louis Theroux, it's on the list. Last question. Who is someone the audience should know more about?
Oh gosh. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Probably my mum.
Your mom? Okay, tell us why.
Because she's just a fabulous lady.
Look at that. You can't go wrong bringing mom into the show. That's 3 questions from our friends at Aureus Medical Staffing. Again, aureusmedical.com. That's aureusmedical.com. If you're looking for a position, go there. Last thing we do on the show, Rachel, it's your parting shot. Let's do that. Rachel's like nervous. She's like, I'm not doing shots. I got work tomorrow. It's not that kind of shot. Not that kind of shot. Parting shot is brought to you by our friends from the Academy of Orthopedic Physical Therapy. Find them at orthopt.org. If you're looking to level up your orthopedic skills game, why not do it from the Academy of Orthopedic Physical Therapy? A lot of continuing education classes there available on now. Tissue tolerance and the running athlete, some brand new ones we'll be talking about later on today. So parting shot, Rachel, is just simply this. What's the sentiment or your mic drop moment, something you'd want the audience of physical therapists to leave with and remember about your story and the situation that you went through?
I think that my physios inspired me to completely change my life, and you have that opportunity with every patient you have. And so I think using that as motivation to always do the best and to not give up on your patients and to be patient with them and to motivate and to educate. I think you can really use that as a power tool, because physio changes lives. And also remember that you're fabulous just doing what you do.
Look at that. Physio changes lives, and you're fabulous. I love that. Rachael Bailey, thanks for giving us some insight. Thanks for sharing your story. I think people are going to learn a lot about it. And then thanks for making our profession look great. You came and you joined the profession. Now you're going to do great things with people. So thank you for being you. We don't expect this to be the last time you're on the show. You did mention you've taken over the physio world, so we'll have you back on when you do that. But thanks for coming by.
Thank you for having me.